Though I love all of C.S. Lewis's books, I do have a favorite. And the name of my favorite C.S. Lewis book is The Great Divorce. Unfortunately, it has a rather unfortunate title. There are many people that do not read The Great Divorce because they can't figure out what's great about divorce. Well, you'll be happy to know that that book has nothing to do with divorce. The title is a response, a rebuttal, if you will, to the great romantic poet William Blake. Back in 1790, William Blake wrote a little mini epic poem called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. And in that book, which is quite brilliant, he argues that heaven and hell are merely states of mind. It's just the way we perceive it. If we perceived heaven to be hell, it would be hell. If we perceived hell to be heaven, it would be heaven. Well, 200 years later, 150 years later, Lewis comes along and says, no, heaven and hell cannot be married. They are about as opposite as two things can possibly be. Now, Lewis does agree that to a certain extent, hell, it is a state of mind. When we close in on ourselves, narcissistically, cut ourselves off from God and grace, and choose only ourself and our sin, we, in a sense, create our own prison, our own hell. But, Lewis says, heaven is the very opposite. Heaven is reality itself. In this wonderful book, Lewis imagines, what if the sinners in hell, if they chose, could get on a bus and ride on that bus to heaven. And when they got to heaven, they would be greeted there by the saints who they were friends with on earth. And those saints, the saved people, would try to convince the sinners, even now, to give up their sin, give up their narcissism, and embrace the love and grace and mercy of Christ. What would they do? Lewis shows that with one exception, every single one of the sinners willingly chooses to go back to hell. They would rather have their own sin than release it and come to heaven. In a way, they've created their own prison. But it is a real prison, and to quote The Last Battle, one of the Chronicles of Narnia, they are so in that prison they can't be taken out because they refuse to give in to the truth. They've created their own truth and refuse reality. Again, we need to understand that heaven is not only vastly different from hell, it is greater and fuller and richer. We need to give up the sin that weighs us down and let God transform us not only into something beautiful, but ultimately something real.